Can we get into that a little bit? Because I read the report, and I talked to Catherine Christensen too, pretty regularly about what's going on. The fact that this was a court martial, and the issue being, a former member of the Canadian Armed Forces, even being an officer of the Canadian Armed Forces, I don't think I understood the military justice system well enough.
Mm.
Why did James end up getting court-martialed in the first place? Was it the fact that he refused vaccination, or was the fact that he was, or maybe a combination thereof, was it because he was a threat to good order and discipline?
Yeah.
How did an individual get to that point? Because there was a lot of individuals that never got to court-martial and were just 5F'd from the military. So why was James now in the court-martial process?
I can explain that to you because I represented a whack of service members who were being 5F'd, and I went to the federal court, tried to get an injunction. So it was a deliberate tactic forced down the Canadian Armed Forces' throat by the Prime Minister's office, where they wanted to use Canadian forces as a public policy example, saying, you guys can enforce, so you make sure everybody gets the vaccine. So they deliberately used the Canadian forces as a public policy pawn to set the conditions to say, look, this department is doing it, everybody's doing it. And I know from insiders and internal memos that they were told at the highest level, the Chief of Defense Staff, this mandate is not needed for operational reasons. It's likely not legal, and we don't need to do it. And when they pushed that up to the Prime Minister's office, they were told, too bad, do it anyhow, even though you're telling us that it's not required and it's not legal. And to answer your question, there's a section in the NDA 126, failure to take a vaccine. That's a charge that they, and so if they issued a direct order to take the vaccine, you said no, you could have charged it, but they deliberately never laid one charge of 126 because they knew it would be found unconstitutional. The way that they were doing it. So that was right from the highest levels of the Canadian Armed Forces. They said, we're going to institute this vaccine mandate policy. We're going to make it in order. And if they don't do it, we're not going to charge them with the charge that's on the books. We're instead going to 5F release them administratively and kick them out as unsuitable for further service. It was, I think, I don't want to say evil, but it was actually like really destroyed the lives of a lot of good people who are irreplaceable. And so across the whole Canadian Forces, not one charge. James Topp was charged because he under Section 129, because he criticized the government's policy while in uniform, right? And so what happened on that February 13th, I think it was 2021, and if you heard the story, the media didn't cover it. It was so disappointing because you actually could viscerally feel the struggle he was feeling before he made that video. And it's public, but he got emotional, I got emotional, the judge was emotional. He described that he put on his uniform and he didn't know what he was going to do in his uniform then. And as we know, sometimes military people, they define themselves through their uniform. He belonged to a reserve unit for a short amount of time, but he put on the uniform that mattered, like his Patricia uniform.
His Patricia, yeah.
Yeah, and he kind of admitted very movingly that he was thinking about killing himself in that uniform. And instead he decided to film something. And it's really like, it gives me shivers because we didn't lose a man who gave so much to us. And he said in the video, I'll take responsibility for making this video. I'm not representing Canadian Forces. I'm wearing this uniform because this is who I am. And he said he took responsibility for it. And then he said he's going to do a walk in protest. And just how no media other than, like, I think the Epoch Times or
Western Standard too, I think.
Western Standard in the North kind of got into that. But, all the CBC wanted to say was, anti-vax guy compared to mutiny. It infuriated me because it didn't capture the emotion. But that's why he was charged, because it was public. And then he went to the protest the same day. He filmed his own video in the morning with his niece. Very polite, very professional, not egoic, not like... Then he goes to the trucker convoy protest close to him, and a professional videographer there interviews him. That goes viral. And why he was hung out to dry is because he pissed people off in Ottawa. But I think the positive angle to the story, and he knows this, is he made a difference. So history will treat him as somebody who made a difference, right? He 7 months, he walked 50 kilometers a day. Like, he suffered, right? And but it was also a way of him kind of dealing with the demons of, I can't deal with this vaccine. What the vaccine has unfortunately done as well is it's polarized people way too much on political line, right? Because I remember when we were deploying to Africa, right? The same rural people, like the ability to go to Africa and blow shit up, they would sprint to get vaccines, or like literally sprint to get them, because that's where they placed value at that time, was to get these missions, because there wasn't a lot of missions back then. It was Cyprus, right? So it's interesting for people to reflect and say, okay, how do things really matter to us? Because then the politics, by the time we got to 2021, we were kind of bifurcated along this. Nobody was talking about the vaccine intelligently. It was either terrifying or, microchipping us. Right? And the answer is somewhere in the middle there. Like
5G towers are messing with
yeah.
It got so overwhelming. And the thing that bothered me the most, I spent most of my youth in school in science. I have a degree in biochem. I wanted to become a science teacher for exactly this purpose. I wanted to ensure the next generation had a good grasp of basic scientific principles and how science works, so that you couldn't get hoodwinked in a society that uses science to be weaponized, so that it forces you into a bad decision that clearly benefits the powers that be. And come along COVID, and that whole scenario, that dystopian type of nightmare that I was envisioning, was happening. And I just couldn't believe that people were being polarized based off a medical decision. It's, it'd be like, use any other medical decision, like being polarized politically based off vasectomies. That doesn't make any sense. So why would this make any sense for a vaccine? I know it's not contagious, a vasectomy, but it was just unfortunate to see families and individuals, even in the forces, just turning on each other. And that's where James filled that gap, at least for me, in terms of bringing a sense of hope, because he was, in my opinion, doing the right thing.
No, he
was doing what everybody wanted to do, right?
I represented some senior people in the Canadian Forces who have been screwed around as well. I don't know if you followed the Whaling case or some others, but
yes,
he's responsible for lifting the mandate. Not solely, but in a large part, his walk, that big walk into Ottawa, it wasn't the trucker convoy. And there's a lesson to that in that James was very calm. Even when he was walking, if somebody came with a flag that said "F you Trudeau" or "Canada is this," he would order them to take it down. Like, he was a professional person. He was like, we're walking to raise awareness.